Your body is being damaged right now by habits you believe are harmless, not occasionally, not when you make obviously poor choices, but every single day through routines you've practiced for years without questioning their impact. These aren't the health mistakes that make headlines or that your doctor lectures you about during annual checkups. These are subtle patterns embedded so deeply into modern life that most people never recognize them as dangerous until the consequences become impossible to ignore. And by that point, the damage is often irreversible. Chronic disease, accelerated aging, immune dysfunction, and early death are not primarily caused by dramatic lifestyle failures or genetic misfortune. They're caused by small daily decisions that compound over decades into catastrophic health outcomes. The experts studying longevity, metabolic health, and disease prevention have identified a cluster of common behaviors that are systematically destroying the health of millions of adults over 50. And what makes these mistakes particularly deadly is that they masquerade as normal, acceptable, or even healthy choices. You're making these mistakes because everyone around you is making them, because the culture has normalized them, and because no one has explained to you what they're actually doing to your cells, your organs, and your lifespan. But the science is clear and the evidence is overwhelming. These daily health mistakes are killing you slowly, and it's time to understand exactly how and why. Hi, I'm Dr. Alex. I'm an emergency medicine doctor, and after nearly 10 years in the emergency department, I've seen the long-term consequences of daily health mistakes manifest as strokes, heart attacks, kidney failure, and metabolic collapse in patients who never saw it coming. They thought they were living normally. They thought they were being reasonably healthy, but their daily routines were systematically undermining their physiology in ways that accumulated silently until a crisis forced them to confront reality. My goal now is to help people identify and correct these deadly mistakes before they cause irreversible damage, and to prevent the diseases I see destroying lives every single day. And I want to take just a few seconds here to make you a promise. I promise to keep creating the most helpful videos I possibly can, grounded in the latest research and science to help you live longer and healthier lives. And all I ask in return is that you give this fairly new channel a chance and hit the subscribe button. If you get to the end of this video and you didn't think it was worth your time or you've not learned something new, then feel free to unsubscribe. No hard feelings. But if you give me your time and your attention, I'll give you everything I've learned from over a decade in medicine. So please help me out. Hit the subscribe button to help this channel reach more people like you. And let's continue with the video. Before we talk about the specific mistakes that are destroying your health, we need to understand why these patterns are so widespread and why they persist despite growing evidence of harm. The answer is that modern life is fundamentally misaligned with human biology. Our bodies evolved over hundreds of thousands of years in environments that required constant physical activity, exposed us to natural light cycles, provided whole unprocessed foods, and embedded us in tight-knit social communities. The Industrial Revolution, and particularly the technological revolution of the past 50 years, have created living conditions that violate nearly every biological requirement for optimal health. We sit for most of our waking hours when our bodies need movement. We're exposed to artificial light at night when our circadian systems need darkness. We eat hyperpalatable processed foods when our metabolic systems are designed for whole foods with fiber and micronutrients. We live isolated from meaningful social connection when our nervous systems require community for regulation. These aren't lifestyle choices we're consciously making. These are default settings of modern existence that we've passively accepted because everyone else is doing the same thing. And the cumulative health cost is staggering. Research published in The Lancet analysed the global burden of disease and found that the majority of premature death and disability in developed nations is caused not by infectious disease or unavoidable genetic conditions, but by modifiable behavioural factors. The leading causes of death, including heart disease, stroke, cancer, diabetes, and chronic respiratory disease, are all driven primarily by daily habits that can be changed. The tragedy is that most people don't change them until they're forced to by a medical crisis. And by that point, significant damage has already occurred. The first deadly mistake you're making every day is eating breakfast when you're not hungry. This sounds counterintuitive because we've been told for decades that breakfast is the most important meal of the day and that skipping it damages metabolism and causes weight gain. But the science doesn't support that claim. The idea that you must eat breakfast originated from observational studies that found breakfast eaters tended to be healthier than breakfast skippers. But those studies confused correlation with causation. People who habitually eat breakfast tend to be more health conscious in general. They exercise more, smoke less, and have better overall dietary patterns. The breakfast itself wasn't causing better health. The underlying health consciousness was when researchers conducted controlled trials where they actually assigned people to eat or skip breakfast while controlling for other factors, they found that eating breakfast when you're not hungry provides no metabolic benefit and in many cases causes harm by extending your daily eating window and preventing your body from accessing the metabolic benefits of fasting. Your body is designed to alternate between fed and fasted states. During the fed state, insulin is elevated and your body stores energy. During the fasted state, insulin drops and your body accesses stored energy, activates cellular repair mechanisms, and clears out damaged proteins through a process called autophagy. When you eat breakfast immediately upon waking, even though you're not hungry, you're shortening your fasting window and preventing these repair processes from completing. You're also forcing your digestive system to process food when it may not be ready, which can cause bloating, inflammation, and metabolic stress. Research published in Cell Metabolism demonstrated that time-restricted eating, which involves limiting food intake to an 8 to 10 hour window during the day, improves insulin sensitivity, reduces inflammation, enhances fat oxidation, and extends lifespan in animal models. Human studies have shown similar benefits, including weight loss, improved blood sugar control, and reduced cardiovascular risk markers. The key is not what you eat for breakfast, but whether eating breakfast at all is aligned with your body's hunger signals and circadian rhythm. If you wake up genuinely hungry, eating a nutrient-dense breakfast is appropriate. But if you're eating breakfast out of habit, or because you've been told you must, you're making a mistake that's disrupting your metabolism and preventing beneficial fasting adaptations. The second deadly mistake you're making every day is staying indoors during daylight hours and exposing yourself to bright artificial light at night. Your circadian rhythm, which is the internal biological clock that regulates sleep, hormone production, immune function, and metabolism, is controlled primarily by light exposure. When your eyes are exposed to bright light, particularly the blue wavelengths present in sunlight, a signal is sent to the suprachiasmatic nucleus in your brain, which sets your circadian clock. This signal tells your body it's daytime, which suppresses melatonin production, increases cortisol, raises body temperature, and optimizes metabolic function for activity. When light exposure decreases in the evening, the absence of that signal triggers melatonin release, which initiates the cascade of physiological changes that prepare your body for sleep and cellular repair. Modern life disrupts this system catastrophically. Most people spend daylight hours indoors under artificial lighting that's far dimmer than natural sunlight. This provides insufficient signal strength to properly set the circadian clock. Then in the evening and night, we expose ourselves to bright artificial light from screens, overhead lights, and devices, which suppresses melatonin and confuses the circadian system into thinking it's still daytime. The health consequences of circadian disruption are severe and well documented. Research published in Nature Reviews Cancer found that chronic circadian misalignment increases cancer risk, particularly breast cancer and colorectal cancer, through mechanisms involving DNA repair deficits and immune dysfunction. Studies in shift workers, who represent the most extreme example of circadian disruption, show dramatically elevated rates of cardiovascular disease, metabolic syndrome, obesity, and early mortality compared to people with normal sleep-wake cycles. Even moderate circadian disruption in people who aren't shift workers but who simply stay indoors during the day and use screens at night shows measurable negative effects on glucose metabolism, inflammatory markers, and cognitive function. The solution is to get bright natural light exposure, ideally sunlight, during the first hour after waking, and to minimize bright light exposure in the 2 to 3 hours before bedtime. This means spending time outdoors in the morning, working near windows when possible during the day, and dimming lights or using blue light blocking glasses in the evening. These simple changes realign your circadian rhythm with your environment and restore the hormonal and metabolic patterns that support health rather than undermine it. The third deadly mistake you're making every day is chronic shallow breathing. Most adults breathe incorrectly without realizing it. Instead of breathing deeply into the belly using the diaphragm, which is the large muscle below the lungs designed for breathing, they breathe shallowly into the upper chest using accessory muscles in the neck and shoulders. This pattern, called chest breathing or thoracic breathing, is a stress response pattern that's supposed to occur only during acute stress or physical exertion. But for millions of people, it's become the default breathing pattern even at rest. Chronic shallow breathing keeps the sympathetic nervous system, which controls the stress response, in a state of activation. When you breathe shallowly, you're signaling to your nervous system that you're under threat, which keeps cortisol elevated, raises heart rate and blood pressure, impairs digestion, and suppresses immune function. Over time, this chronic sympathetic activation contributes to anxiety, insomnia, cardiovascular disease, and metabolic dysfunction. Research published in Frontiers in Psychology demonstrated that controlled slow deep breathing, particularly when practiced regularly, reduces sympathetic activity, lowers cortisol, decreases inflammation, improves heart rate variability, and enhances emotional regulation. The mechanism involves the vagus nerve, which is the primary nerve of the parasympathetic nervous system, responsible for rest, recovery, and cellular repair. Deep diaphragmatic breathing activates the vagus nerve and shifts the autonomic balance away from stress and toward relaxation and healing. The solution is to practice conscious breathing several times per day. Sit or lie comfortably, place one hand on your chest and one on your belly, and breathe in slowly through your nose while allowing your belly to expand. Your chest should barely move. Exhale slowly through your nose or mouth, allowing your belly to fall. Repeat for 5 to 10 breaths. This simple practice, done consistently, retrains your nervous system and reverses the chronic stress activation caused by years of shallow breathing. The fourth deadly mistake you're making every day is drinking your calories. This includes fruit juice, soda, sweetened coffee drinks, sports drinks, energy drinks, and flavored waters. When you consume calories in liquid form, your body processes them differently than calories from solid food. Liquid calories don't trigger the same satiety signals that solid food does, which means you don't feel full after drinking them and you don't compensate by eating less later. This leads to overconsumption of total calories without your awareness. But the more serious problem is the metabolic impact of liquid sugar. When you drink a beverage containing sugar, whether it's from fruit juice, soda, or a sweetened latte, the sugar is absorbed rapidly into your bloodstream because there's no fiber or solid food matrix to slow absorption. This causes a sharp spike in blood glucose, followed by a corresponding insulin surge. The rapid glucose spike promotes glycation, which damages proteins throughout your body. The insulin surge promotes fat storage, particularly in the liver, leading to fatty liver disease. And the subsequent blood sugar crash triggers hunger and cravings, perpetuating a cycle of overconsumption. Research published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition found that liquid sugar consumption, even when total calorie intake is controlled, increases visceral fat accumulation, raises triglycerides, elevates blood pressure, and worsens insulin sensitivity compared to the same number of calories consumed from solid food. The mechanism involves the liver's response to fructose, which is a sugar found in both fruit juice and high fructose corn syrup. When fructose is consumed in liquid form without the fiber present in whole fruit, it's delivered to the liver in high concentrations where it's rapidly converted to fat. This process generates uric acid, which damages blood vessels and kidneys and triggers inflammatory pathways that promote metabolic disease. Even beverages marketed as healthy, such as fresh squeezed orange juice or green juice, cause these metabolic problems because the fiber has been removed and the sugar is concentrated. The solution is to drink only water, unsweetened tea, or black coffee. If you want fruit, eat it whole, so the fiber slows sugar absorption and provides satiety. This single change eliminates one of the most powerful drivers of metabolic disease from your daily routine. The fifth deadly mistake you're making every day is ignoring your body's need for regular movement variability. Most people think of exercise as something you do at specific times, like going to the gym for an hour or going for a run. And while dedicated exercise is valuable, it's insufficient if you're sedentary for the remaining 15 hours of your waking day. But even more important than avoiding prolonged sitting, which we've discussed before, is the concept of movement variability. Your body needs to move in many different ways through many different ranges of motion, using many different muscle groups and movement patterns throughout the day. Modern life has reduced most people's movement to a handful of repetitive patterns. Walking in a straight line on flat surfaces, sitting in chairs, standing upright, and occasionally lifting objects. We rarely squat, crawl, twist, hang, climb, or move laterally. This lack of movement diversity causes several problems. Muscles and joints that aren't regularly moved through their full range of motion become stiff and lose mobility. Connective tissue adapts to limited movement patterns and becomes less resilient. Balance and proprioception deteriorate because the nervous system isn't challenged with varied movement demands. And the cumulative result is functional decline, injury risk, and loss of independence as you age. Research on traditional populations who maintain high levels of physical function into old age shows that they don't necessarily exercise more than sedentary Westerners, but they move constantly throughout the day in varied patterns. They squat to rest and work, they sit on the ground and get up repeatedly. They climb, they carry irregular loads, they walk on uneven terrain. This constant movement variability maintains joint health, muscle function, and nervous system adaptability. The solution is to incorporate movement variability into your daily routine. Sit on the floor instead of a chair when possible, and practice getting up without using your hands. Squat deeply while doing tasks around the house. Hang from a pull-up bar or tree branch for short periods to decompress your spine and maintain shoulder mobility. Walk barefoot on varied terrain when safe to do so to challenge your balance and foot mechanics. Twist, reach, and move in ways that aren't part of your normal routine. These varied movements keep your body adaptable and resilient rather than locked into rigid patterns that break down over time. The sixth deadly mistake you're making every day is chronic low-grade dehydration. Most adults are mildly dehydrated, most of the time without realizing it, because they've become accustomed to the feeling and no longer recognize thirst signals accurately. The standard advice to drink 8 glasses of water per day is an oversimplification, but the underlying principle that most people need to drink more water is correct. Chronic dehydration impairs every physiological system. It reduces blood volume, which forces the heart to work harder to deliver oxygen and nutrients to tissues. It impairs kidney function and waste elimination, allowing toxins to accumulate. It reduces cognitive function, causing brain fog, difficulty concentrating, and mood disturbances. It impairs joint lubrication, contributing to arthritis and injury. And it slows metabolic processes, reducing energy production and cellular repair. Research published in the Journal of Nutrition found that even mild dehydration, defined as losing just 1 to 2% of body weight through fluid loss, significantly impairs cognitive performance, mood, and physical endurance. Chronic mild dehydration over years contributes to kidney disease, urinary tract infections, constipation, and increased risk of kidney stones. The solution is to drink water consistently throughout the day rather than waiting until you feel thirsty. By the time you're consciously thirsty, you're already dehydrated. A practical approach is to drink a glass of water upon waking, a glass before each meal, and a glass mid-morning and mid-afternoon. Monitor your urine color. If it's dark yellow, you're dehydrated. It should be pale yellow to clear. And increase water intake during hot weather, physical activity, or illness when fluid needs are higher. The seventh deadly mistake you're making every day is consuming ultra-processed foods that contain additives and chemicals your body doesn't recognize as food. We've discussed specific problematic ingredients like emulsifiers and artificial sweeteners in previous videos, But the broader issue is that ultra-processed foods, which make up approximately 60% of the average American diet, are fundamentally different from real food in ways that damage health. Ultra-processed foods are industrial formulations made mostly from substances extracted from foods, such as oils, sugars, and proteins, combined with additives including preservatives, colorings, flavorings, and texturizers. They're designed to be hyperpalatable, shelf-stable, and profitable, not to nourish the human body. When you eat ultra-processed foods, you're exposing yourself to compounds that disrupt gut health, alter hormonal signaling, promote inflammation, and interfere with normal metabolic function. Research published in the BMJ found that higher consumption of ultra-processed foods was associated with increased risk of cardiovascular disease, cancer, and all-cause mortality. Each 10% increase in the proportion of ultra-processed foods in the diet was associated with a 12% increase in cancer risk. The solution is to base your diet on whole foods that your great-grandmother would recognize as food. Vegetables, fruits, whole grains, legumes, nuts, seeds, eggs, fish, and unprocessed meats. When you buy packaged foods, read ingredient lists and avoid products with long lists of unpronounceable chemicals. The fewer ingredients and the more recognizable they are, the closer the product is to real food. Let me bring this back to the emergency department because I want you to see the real-world consequences of these daily mistakes compounding over decades. I've treated a 61-year-old man who came in with a severe stroke. His medical history included diabetes, high blood pressure, and obesity, but he'd been managing all three with medication. When we talked about his daily routine, every single deadly mistake we've discussed was present. He ate breakfast whether he was hungry or not because he'd been told it was essential. He worked indoors all day and watched television in a brightly lit room until midnight. He breathed shallowly through his chest and felt anxious constantly. He drank multiple sodas daily. He moved only in straight lines between his car, desk, and couch. He was chronically dehydrated and drank little water, and his diet was dominated by ultra-processed convenience foods. None of these habits alone would have caused his stroke. But together, compounded over 30 years, they created the metabolic dysfunction, vascular damage, and inflammatory state that made the stroke inevitable. The bigger picture here is that deadly health mistakes are rarely dramatic or obvious. They're the normalized daily patterns that everyone engages in without questioning. And because everyone is making the same mistakes, they don't seem like mistakes at all. They seem like normal life. But normal life in modern industrial societies is killing people prematurely through mechanisms that are well understood and entirely preventable. The experts warning about these deadly mistakes are not promoting extreme or fringe ideas. They're synthesizing decades of research showing that small daily decisions about when and what you eat, how you manage light exposure and breathing, whether you drink calories, how you move your body, whether you stay hydrated, and whether you eat real food or chemical formulations, determine your health trajectory more powerfully than your genetics or your access to medical care. So here's the bottom line, and this is what I really want you to take away from this. You're making deadly health mistakes every single day, not because you're careless or uninformed, but because modern life is structured in ways that make these mistakes the default option. Eating breakfast when you're not hungry disrupts metabolic cycles and prevents fasting benefits. Staying indoors during the day and exposing yourself to bright light at night destroys your circadian rhythm and impairs every physiological system. Chronic shallow breathing keeps your nervous system locked in stress mode. Drinking your calories causes metabolic damage that solid food doesn't. Lack of movement variability degrades physical function and increases injury risk. Chronic dehydration impairs cognition, metabolism, and organ function. And consuming ultra-processed foods exposes you to chemicals that promote disease. Every single one of these mistakes is correctable through simple changes that cost nothing and require only awareness and intention. The diseases I see in the emergency department are not inevitable. They're the predictable consequences of daily patterns that can be changed. And the time to change them is now, before the damage becomes irreversible. And finally, just to end, please subscribe to the channel if you found this useful to help me reach more people like you.